Divinity Original Sin 2 is a top-down, turn-based, party-based RPG. It's up to 4-player multiplayer, although it's designed that you can play it single-player or with friends, it's up to you. It's fundamentally a story, a fantasy story of growth and a journey that you can experience. And we've created a system and a world where you can truly interact. So a lot of our design philosophies and goals in the game design is to make sure that the world feels truly immersive, that whatever you want to do and however you want to solve the problems put in front of you, you're given the tools to do that. Divinity Original Sin 1 and Original Sin 2 have both been turn-based from the get-go. We've always had turn-based combat, but the unique thing, I guess, is that it's obviously real-time into turn-based, and it's designed in such a way that, say we're playing together, you could be on the other side of the world interacting with a shopkeeper, selling all your wares, and I could stumble into a random ambush and start fighting, and the game doesn't go turn-based for you, it's just turn-based for me. And so yeah, it's this world where we want to make sure that it feels like you can act separately if you want to, or you can come to the same fight as me and then you join the turn-based with me. But yeah, the combat's always been turn-based for sure. Sure, so I mean, on a technical basis, the game is fundamentally it's a single player or a small multiplayer experience. It's only up to 4 players. So the way it works is the one person is the host, and that's where the save file resides. So say we're playing together and you want to continue yourself. If you're the one that hosted the game, you could just say, okay, I'm just going to keep playing. You take control of my characters and you play on. If I wanted to play it, I would need to take your save file. It's not a big deal, but basically one person is the host. They control all the characters, but if we start the game together, I have my own personal quest lines and everything else that's in that save file. So the first 2 levels of the game, levels is a very broad term for what is essentially 20-hour experiences, but Fort Joy and the swamps around it is about 15 to 20 hours of the game. And that originally was a small part of one map, and that map is Reaper's Coast, which is the second map you encounter, which is about 40 hours of gameplay-ish, give or take. And so both of those were actually the original just one act of the game, and when we realized, oh wait a minute, there's so much that could happen in Fort Joy. So Fort Joy is like this prison, so a very, very brief guideline of the story. You're a sorcerer, you're getting arrested because of a special type of power you have. They don't know how to control it, and when you use it, bad things happen. So they're basically locking people away to try and keep people safe, and that's where they're locking you up, in Fort Joy. And so by doing that, they're trying to quarantine the situation. So Fort Joy became this thing where it's a bit too small to really tell a proper story there, so we basically expanded it, and yes, it's now a 15 to 20 hour experience in the main game. So that's our philosophy, has always been make sure that when we're designing a world, none of it is ever forced on you in that we have to tell you all the story, so we're going to tell you right now. The way we tell our story has always very much been, again, immersive storytelling. So we want to make sure that you have a conversation with this guy, or you read a book, or you have this interesting fight in an environment that tells you something about the world. So much of the world and the story is told through these interactions. We don't really do cutscenes. So in that way, it's kind of hard to tell you a huge amount of what happens in Fort Joy without letting you experience it, if that makes sense. Because we're actually, we are an independent studio, we're working with Bandai here, and we have a partnership for distributing on console, but very much we are an independent studio. We independently published Original Sin 2 on PC. That freedom has allowed us to basically not worry about the milestones and just release games when it's ready. And by doing that, we have the freedom to be iterative with our design, maybe more than most, which is a real blessing. So for instance, we have about 8 writers, I think it was, on Original Sin 2. And it took a good while before we really felt like we had the method of speaking perfect, you know? Like we had to make some interesting decisions on how we portrayed your voice as the player with these characters. We had to make some interesting decisions on how the different races were interacting. And all of that was through an iterative process that we explored before we launched on Fort Joy for early access. And then over the course of early access, we tweaked some things as well. But we really rely on that iterative process to make sure that we're really happy with the design in general. Well, I mean, there's probably potential in level design for everything, right? So, I mean, there was definitely some great ideas and some great exploration ideas. For instance, there's probably about 4 or 5 properly scripted ways of escaping Fort Joy, but there's probably about 12 to 13 different ways of doing that through the systems at play as well. So, because we give you various tools like teleportation or sneaking even, there's various ways of escaping the prison that we've created that, you know, we didn't even discover until we launched in early access, and some of our players were doing some cool stuff that we didn't expect. And that's what we give the tools to the players to do that. So the level design wise, there was a lot we could do at Fort Joy for sure, but very much it was we wanted to make sure that the players felt like there was a proper journey for their heroes to go through. Each of the 6 origin stories have a unique take on what that journey is, but you need to start that journey somewhere, and Fort Joy is the start of that journey. We wanted to make sure you felt invested in the world, you knew the problems in the world, and Fort Joy was a great tool to do that. Well, our players are quite creative, as you probably imagine. There's been some situations for sure. First of all, there's been a couple of situations where they were so powerful we had to either nerf them or tweak them. So there's an ability that you saw actually in that presentation. You saw the chicken claw ability. It's part of our metamorph, polymorph skill tree, and it basically allows you to turn somebody into a chicken for 2 or 3 turns. So somebody was using that, plus a skill called ruptured tendons. And so ruptured tendons means is when you move, you take damage, because they basically cut you, and so when you start moving, you're bleeding. So they would turn someone into a chicken and then cut them. So they ran away and killed themselves, essentially. So that was a little bit too powerful. We have a telekinesis ability in the game, so you're able to move objects without necessarily touching them and whatever else, and that's a specific thing that you would have to level up. Somebody got the ability so powerful that they could move this massive painting in the game of Alexander, who's one of the main characters in the game, one of the main NPCs. And they were moving this massive painting of Alexander in such a way that they were blocking line of sight and just shifting ever so slightly, and blocking line of sight to basically get away with fights and avoid combat, stuff like that. So, I mean, our players are very creative. I'm not sure if you're aware, but we have consistently been on the Games Done Quick streaming, because there are speedrunners that finish Original Sin 1 in, I think, just over 30 minutes. It's 100 hours worth of gameplay, and they're finishing in 30 minutes. And I'm pretty sure the DOS 2 guys are finishing it in 35, 36. I don't know how they're doing it. I haven't seen the DOS 2 guys work at it yet, but very much they're using the skills to their advantage. They're using stealth, they're using haste, they're using creative ways to finish things off. Yeah, so the game, we do have a lot of mods. We have a modding community, again, very active on the Discord server. In fact, we have a dedicated team member that works on engine tools for the modding community. So he obviously does other things, but he's been making sure that the modding community is feeling like they can actually interact with the engine as much as possible. So if you own Original Sin 2, for instance, on Steam, you'll be able to download the engine on Steam as well. And so people can fiddle with it if they want to and make levels and maps. And I mean, if you've played something like Planet Coaster, where you're basically kind of molding the terrain and placing objects, 1 or 2 tutorials, you can build your own map in Original Sin 2. So we've definitely got a lot of user-generated content, and there's definitely a lot of mods in there. There's actually somebody right now rebuilding Ultima 4, I think it is, in the Divinity engine, which is crazy.